First thing first, as usual, we're going to canvas the data. We have a list of NFL football players for a fantasy football draft coming up here in a few weeks. Many of you are probably in this, so you'll be looking at some familiar data here. We've got overall rank, we've got position rank, the position itself, the player's name, what team they belong to, and their bye week. In other words, what week within the season are they not playing a game? Okay. And if we scroll down, we can see that we have 300 players. Okay, 300 total players. And what we're going to do here is imagine that you want to look at some of this information during your draft, but you don't want to search for it. You don't want to dig around for it. You don't want to scroll up and down. You don't want to hit Control F, find and replace. You don't want to look for by week 11. You don't want to look for by week 5 and then get all these other 5s all over the place. Okay. What we're going to do is create a pivot table which takes this information that we have here and spins it on its head. In other words, it pivots. So imagine you're standing and you pivot to the left or right with your foot. That is essentially what a pivot table does. Okay? That's why it's also the second video, so that you watch the first video on transposing, where we go from horizontal to vertical. We could have done vertical to horizontal. That's pivoting. So we're just doing some pivots. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is select our data. Now, I want you to go to A1 and notice something here. Click on A1, and then I want you to go to Insert. I want you to go to Pivot Table, which is the first one on that list. Pivot Table. A new box shows up. Select a table or range. Now, Excel has already identified all of the data in your sheet. It has said A1 to F301. It looks like this is the data you want me to create a pivot table out of. Okay? So sometimes Excel can be very helpful for us. You have to be careful though. Before you hit OK, you need to make sure that this is indeed all the information. Okay? Sometimes Excel gets it wrong and they miss a column or they miss a row, but we have to be very careful. Okay? There's some other options here. Instead of selecting a table, we could select a worksheet that we're not even opening right now, but most of the time we're going to be selecting a table in a spreadsheet we've already opened. A couple options down here. Do I want to put it in a new worksheet, or do I want to put it in an existing worksheet? You can play around with this if you like. Let's go with new worksheet. And then choose whether you want to analyze multiple tables, or we're not going to choose this option. So what we have selected is the standard. 9 times out of 10, this is what people will choose. We're going to hit OK. And the first thing I want you to notice is it created a new sheet called Sheet 2. What I'd like you to do, just as some good principle, is type in pivot table down there. So rename it to pivot table. The other thing I want you to notice is if you look here, it says pivot table 1, build a report, choose fields from the pivot table field list. Okay. Now scroll to the right with your eyes and you can see pivot table fields. You see filters, columns, rows, and values. Okay. So we were over here. Now we went all the way over here. I feel like I'm John Madden here, aging myself a little bit for those of you that know who John Madden is. Okay, got our X's there, got our Y's there. Okay, so that's stuff. Okay. Now I want you to notice also up here it says Pivot Table Tools, Analyze and Design. Okay, so we canvassed how this works. Now I want you to left click on any cell over here. And I want you to notice the right side disappeared and our options up here disappeared. Okay, sometimes people get confused on why that is. It's because we need to click back on this pivot table stuff over here. Our options come back. Okay, very good. Now let's play around with this. At this point, pivot tables are what we would call plug and play, drag and drop. So I've got these fields over here, overall rank, position rank, player, team, and buy. when it comes to fantasy football, we often draft in terms of player position. Okay? Because we want good running backs, good wide receivers, good quarterbacks, tight ends, kickers, and defense. And we don't always get to have an unlimited number of them. So I can't pick 20 running backs, or I can't pick 7 running backs. I have to pick maybe 2 or 3, 4 running backs, and then I got to take some wide receivers and a quarterback. So we want to be careful with how we set up our pivot table based on what we want to look at most importantly. So what I would like to do is there's a couple ways to do this. You could left click in this check mark box for position, and I want you to see what happened. When we did that, it brought the position down to the rows. Okay? And it also created our actual pivot table on the left here. Okay? But it doesn't have any data in it. It's got defense, special teams, kickers, quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. What I want to do now is I want to put the player in the values. Okay? So I'm going to hold it. Left click and hold on the word player. And you can see closely how I'm moving this around. I'm still holding. I'm going to drop it down in the values box. So now our pivot table, if I zoom in here, our pivot table is starting to build. We've got our row, which is our positions, and we've got number of players in those positions. Okay? So we've got 18 kickers, 32 quarterbacks, 91 running backs, 34 tight ends, 103 wide receivers. So that's a pivot table. Summarized it for us, and we can keep going. Let's say I now want to put in bye week. So I want to put in bye week, but this time I'm going to put it under rows, and I'll show you what happens. I'm going to put it after position. So now our pivot table, getting kind of crazy, our pivot table shows defense, special teams, that same 22 that we had previously, but now it broke it out by bye week. So in week number 4, we have one defensive team that is not playing a game. In week 5, we've got 3 teams that are not playing a game. In week 6, we have 2, etc. Week 9, for example, because we've set up this pivot table, it shows that there are 6 players or teams that will not be playing in week 9. If we keep going down, you can see how this breaks out even further. Okay? So we're going to put that back. And I want to show you now, we're going to make this into what's called a crosstab table, where we have useful information going across as well. So I'm going to put a team here, but this time I'm going to put it in columns. So I'm going to left click on it, move it, and put it over here. So now look what we just did with our pivot table. Defense, special teams, got 1 all the way across. It shows the actual teams. Right? We've got kickers, 1, 1, 1. So with these blanks or null values, that means out of the top 300 players that we got for the NFL draft, Buffalo's kicker is not in the top 300. So he's not a very good player according to the data that we got. Same with Cincinnati and Cleveland. In fact, Cleveland has a defensive special teams and kicker that have a null value. So you can see how this pivot table is quickly showing you some good information. You know, there's so many ways to look at this. Arizona has 3 running backs that are in the top 300. They've got 4 wide receivers, no tight ends, but overall they have 10 players that are in the top 300. Atlanta Falcons have 8 players. Let's keep going, and we've got 12 here for Green Bay. Okay. Do we have any higher numbers here? No, we don't. So it looks like Green Bay has the most number of players. We've got New England Patriots, and we've got Seattle Seahawks up there as well, and Detroit Lions. So you can see how pivot tables, when we play around with them in columns, rows, and values, can show us something unique. Okay? Now, the other thing I want to show you is this filter box. We haven't done anything with filter yet. So what I want you to do is I'm going to have you left click on by and bring that down to filters. And what happens here is we've got in A1, we've got the word by, And then we have a drop-down menu in B1. If we left click, it's going to show us all of those weeks in the NFL football team that have buys. Let's click on number 8 and see what happens. When we click on 8, our pivot table changes quite a bit. It removed a large number of teams, so a lot of our columns are gone. We're still the same positions, but now we've got some information here that shows what teams. So we've got Baltimore, okay, we've got Miami, we've got New York, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, we've got Los Angeles. All these teams have buys in week 8. And as you can see here, running backs are very popular. So we want to be careful if we're going to draft running backs for week 8. We don't want any from these teams because they will not be playing. They won't give us any points. So that's what filters do. Okay? Let's look at week 4, the first week of buys. And Green Bay and Philadelphia both have buys that week. So we want to be careful. That's what pivot tables can do.